You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 23rd of February 2026 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. Coming up on today's programme, we'll examine the latest news surrounding Greenland, including the possible renegotiation of the Nordic treaty and Trump's offer of sending a hospital boat to the island. Then,
that's part of the diplomatic work that the secretary has to do, is to reinstill some trust in this relationship. I think it's doable, but it's going to take some time.
That's the United States' first ever Ambassador-at-Large for Arctic Affairs, Mike Sfraga, telling us what he thinks of the Greenland issue. We'll hear about all the winners and losers at last night's Bafta Awards, and then...
So many decades after the end of the World War, I do not understand why Japan is still such a slave to the United States.
That's Chilean artist Alfredo Jaar talking about his solo exhibition in Tokyo. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Georgina Godwin. We begin the programme with Greenland and an important development which could happen on Wednesday. The Treaty of Nordic Cooperation was created in 1962 and at a meeting this week it may well be updated to elevate the status of not only Greenland but also the Faroe Islands and Finland's Åland. Well, joining us from Helsinki for more on this is our Patri Burtsoff. Patri, hello to you. What is the background to this Nordic cooperation?
Yes, so this is the so-called Helsinki Treaty, which was adopted in 1962, which basically set up the Nordic Council of Ministers and the Nordic Council, interparliamentary and intergovernmental bodies for the Nordic cooperation. And what is basically being decided now is that, as you mentioned, Greenland and the Faroe Islands and Åland would be sort of full-fledged members of this community. I mean, they're obviously members because of the sort of the bigger nations, Denmark and Finland are members, but there are some things that they don't have access to, such as sort of intelligence, information, and security and defense policy. And Greenland has actually been quite vocal about this. You know, they even skipped a meeting 2 years ago, a Nordic Council meeting, because they're not sort of full autonomous members of it.
Mm-hmm. So what could this mean for Greenland's future if there is a change?
Well, I mean, it would be, first of all, it would be a very symbolic change, further anchoring Greenland into the Nordic community. Of course, we have to remember that prior to Trump's threats, Greenland has for a long time expressed a willingness to become independent and sort of go their separate ways with Denmark. But now, with the a more autonomous membership of the Nordic Council, they would be just sort of further anchored in the Nordic community. And then in addition, of course, as I mentioned, they would have access to all the same information as the other full members of the Nordic Council.
And are there any implications for Finland?
Well, I mean, from the point of view of the Åland, of course, there are implications to Finland, and then sort of also the security implications, of course, in the Arctic. We all know that last week NATO launched the Arctic Center program. Finland is part of that, sort of increasing the military presence in the Arctic waters, and Greenland becoming member of the Nordic Council and having access to all that security information and planning will have implications to the whole Nordic region, of course.
Mm. Now, let's turn to the latest news about Greenland from this weekend. It appears Donald Trump may have got the wrong end of the stick. Why did he offer to send a hospital ship?
Yeah, this guy never stops, right? He posted on his social media, the Truth Social, that he would send what he called, of course, a great hospital boat to Greenland to take, and I quote, to take care of the many people who are sick and not being taken care of there, end quote, this is what he said, and this caused quite a strong reaction in Greenland, with their Prime Minister Jens Fredrik Nielsen responding with a firm no thanks to Trump, and not only saying that, but also saying that, look, Mr. Trump, Greenland already has publicly funded a system of that provides free healthcare to all of its citizens, so we don't really need the help. And even going further than saying that, it's not like that in the United States, where it costs money to go to the doctor. So a bit of a jab at Trump there as well, and using just very strong language, saying it's almost funny reading these comments. I mean, he said that it's going to be a no thanks from us, and then Nielsen also said that Trump should talk to us instead of just making more or less random outbursts on social media. It's really rare to read this sort of strong rebuttals like this from European leaders.
I mean, it's great, though, that somebody is finally talking back and actually just calling it, just pointing out how ridiculous it is. I mean, Trump, this actually originates from one person being ill and having to be evacuated, right?
Well, yeah, that's like, I suppose that's one theory, and it almost makes this sort of ironic, because Denmark did evacuate an American crew member of a U.S. submarine off the coast of Greenland just a few days ago to the capital of Greenland, Nuuk. But yeah, is it a response to this? Is it some people have said that it might even could be interpreted as a soft power maneuver, Trump trying to win the hearts and minds of Greenlanders. Also, although I have to say, I personally really doubt this. Why didn't he try that in the beginning? But yeah, it's. There are so many aspects to this. And then interestingly, I just read today, this was in Politico, a story about Iceland planning a possible referendum to join the EU as early as this summer as a result of Trump's posturing in the Arctic. So it's just, his way of carrying out politics is having really wide-reaching repercussions in the Nordic and the Arctic regions.
And would you say in the Nordic regions in particular that people are laughing at him?
I would say that it's not exaggeration to say that people are laughing. If you look at sort of also on TV, these sort of talk shows and comedy shows, Trump is a regular feature on them, and he's just not taken very seriously. And then, of course, looking at where, for example, Finns travel. So the Finns travel to the U.S. has really dipped. So people are also, they're sort of laughing at him, but they're also in sort of financial terms, they're not taking their money to the US anymore, and also started to boycott American products. And
Petri, we need to leave this here, but just to point out that we have seen before, when people laugh at Trump, that's when he gets really vicious, right?
Yes, that's always the risk.
Petri, thank you very much indeed. That's Petri Burtsoff, our Helsinki correspondent. Now here's Monocle's Carlotta Rebella with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Georgina. An overnight Russian attack on Ukraine's southern Odessa region killed 2 and injured 3, according to local authorities. Ukraine's infrastructure minister said in a statement that Moscow hit port infrastructure in an attempt to impact civilian logistics and undermine the region's economy. This comes just a day before the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. Rob Jetten has been formally sworn in as the youngest and first openly gay prime minister in Dutch history. The 38-year-old politician takes office after his pro-EU D66 party clinched a surprising victory in the nation's general election last October. And South Korea's 3 major broadcasters have filed a lawsuit against OpenAI, alleging that its service ChatGPT was trained using the channel's news content without permission. This is the first time Korean broadcasters have collectively taken legal action against a global AI company. Those are today's headlines. Back to you, Georgina.
Thank you, Carlotta. Arctic security is not usually a primary theme of the Munich Security Conference, but US President Donald Trump's ambitions of acquiring Greenland, possibly at the cost of war with the NATO ally Denmark, meant that the subject was difficult to avoid. Back in slightly saner times, i.e. late 2024, the United States appointed its first ever ambassador-at-large for Arctic affairs. That's Mike Sfraga, an Alaskan-born geographer who served for the remainder of President Joe Biden's term. Ambassador Sfraga spoke to Monocle's Andrew Muller at the Munich Security Conference, and Andrew began by asking him if he thought President Trump was serious when he first talked about Greenland.
I have to say he's more serious about it than I first thought he was. First, in the first administration, I thought it was, a lot of narrative, a lot of projection, but it's clear that it's not that. This is quite a different thing than it was maybe the first time around. I think there's always been a desire to bring Greenland closer to the U.S. in a number of different ways, but now there seems to be a different air of not just talk about it, but to do things, not just in Greenland, but as we've seen around the world.
But leaving aside that hopefully now subsided period of craziness, is Greenland actually insufficiently defended? Is this perhaps one of those things like European defence preparedness, whereby whatever difficulties one may have had with how President Trump went about expressing himself, he may have had some kind of a point?
So if the end game is enhanced U.S. security, then he is right. You need Greenland as part of the North American security architecture. So there is a grain of truth and purpose, I think, in what he is saying. I agree we have to invest in Greenland vis-a-vis our military structure. And I would talk about also investments in civil society and in research and in tourism and mining. But I think we do need enhanced security in Greenland for Greenland security, NATO security, and U.S. security. And there's a way to do that. We can do that. There's a door that's waiting to be pushed open.
Is that door still waiting to be pushed open, though, do you think? Because obviously the United States, as I hope everybody understands by now, pretty much could always have built whatever it liked on Greenland in terms of military bases, etc. But to do that now, that's what the United States wants to do. It's going to have to ask Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark to trust us. And I'm not sure how keen Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark are going to be to trust the United States relative to, let's say, this time 2 years ago.
Yeah, it very much is a different atmosphere now. I'm hopeful because we have a high-level diplomatic engagement happening between the Secretary, Foreign Minister Motzfeldt, and Foreign Minister Rasmussen. Look, trust needs to be repaired here, and I think that's part of the diplomatic work that the Secretary has to do, is to reinstill some trust in this relationship. I think it's doable, but it's going to take some time. So I can see something evolving where we have an enhanced presence. The U.S. has an enhanced presence in Greenland, maybe opening up another base or two, or inviting Arctic Sentry to have a more robust presence in Greenland, something along those lines. The President could claim victory. We do have a better security architecture. But I think it's going to take a while. It's going to take a long time, I think, for Greenland, for the Kingdom, and quite frankly, European allies to trust the U.S. as much as they trusted us before.
But when you were Ambassador at Large for Arctic Affairs under President Biden, was it your conviction at the time, and perhaps did you hold this conviction more deeply than he did, that the Arctic was insufficiently defended?
I did hold, it holds true today as it was before. I think the Arctic needs to have more investment in our collective security, all the way from Alaska through Canada into Greenland, that North American architecture. I felt that then, I feel that today. I think it's the way in which we go about things is really the underscoring here, right? Because we all knew that we had an agreement. We worked on shared relationships with the Kingdom and with Greenland when I was in service at the State Department. And we talked about the two anchors. Greenland is one, Canada as part of NORAD, and Alaska as another pillar on the western side of NATO, and making that architecture robust so adversaries would understand it'd be a cost to pay if they ever tried to do anything. That's what we talked about during the Biden administration. We talk about it now. I think it's the approach and how you do it, and I do think that door is still open to push.
And just finally, though, on the understanding that this stuff, ideally, you would think begins at home, as an Alaska native yourself, does the United States even take the defense of its own Arctic state seriously enough?
Not as seriously as I think they should. Senator Sullivan, Senator Murkowski have done a really good job of convincing their colleagues that you have to invest in Alaska for our national security, our homeland security, not just because of Russia, but because of North Korea, and because more and more we have Chinese and Russian naval armadas working together off the coast of Alaska. We have Bear bombers and Russian bombers patrolling off the coast of Alaska. We have shared Coast Guard between Russia and the PRC in the Bering Strait. We have 4 or 5 quote-unquote research vessels from the PRC operating in the Bering Sea. It's quite different than in the Barents or the North Atlantic. So those eyes that were being drawn north by not just our senators now, but by others who understand what the geopolitics are, but also how the connection between the South Pacific, North Pacific, the Bering Sea, the Bering Strait how that's all connected to our collective homeland security. I think it's easier now. But if you ask an American today, most Americans would not identify as an Arctic nation, an Atlantic nation, a Pacific nation, a Gulf of Mexico nation. But Arctic would be a stretch. However, the headlines have helped raise awareness that there are other things in the Arctic aside from security. There are people who live there, food, water, energy, all those things.
And that's Mike Sfraga speaking to Andrew Muller at the Munich Security Conference. This is The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Now, judging by the hangovers in Midori House today, the Baftas last night were one hell of a party. But aside from the guests and the media letting their hair down, let's hear about the big winners and losers of the night with our senior producer, Laura Kramer, in our Zurich studio. Laura, hello to you.
Hi, Georgina. I'm just sad I wasn't in London because the Baftas is one of the most fun parties around. It's a shame I wasn't at Royal Festival Hall for this one, but always a good time, as you say.
Well, I would be breaking a confidence to tell you who partied with whom, but I can assure you a very good time was had by all. But let's talk about the winners on the stage rather than those who just scored off it. Who were the big winners?
Well, big night at the Baftas. And, the story really kind of belonged to Robert Aramayo. He made history by becoming the first performer to win both the Rising Star and the Best Actor awards in the same year. His Best Actor win was for I Swear, in which he plays the Tourette's campaigner John Davidson. And what makes that really even bigger is that he beat out the likes of Leonardo DiCaprio and Timothée Chalamet. Now, on paper, they are definitely arguably the much bigger stars, but of course, BAFTAs also really love to celebrate local films, and this is a British biographical drama, so it's no surprises, really. Best Actress went to Jessie Buckley for Hamlet, and that was another historic moment because she became the first Irish performer to win in that category. Hamlet also won for the Best British Film. And in terms of the big overall winner, the biggest award of the night was for One Battle After Another. That is directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, who picked up 6 awards, including Best Film and Best Director. And I think what's really important about that is that this kind of across-the-board support from the acting category to technical categories, it really makes it look like an extremely strong contender ahead of the Oscars next month. But there were also some really nice moments in genre filmmaking. One of my favorite films that was nominated as I say horror, but it's really genre bending. The Sinners picked up 3 awards, and also Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein just absolutely swept the design categories. So really nice to see recognition for more bold and stylized cinema as well.
Absolutely. Now, just talking about this Best Actor, Robert Aramayo. I mean, Hell versus Hollywood, a surprise win for a British city, a northern British city.
Absolutely, and it's really nice. His acceptance speech was so sweet too. Ethan Hawke, he was up against him as well in the category, and he actually said that Ethan Hawke had given a speech to him when he was at Juilliard or to their class, and he just thanked him for inspiring him. And Ethan looked genuinely moved by that too. So a very sweet moment.
I want to talk a little bit about Wunmi Mosaku, who moved to the UK from Nigeria when she was just a year old, and she was Best Supporting Actress.
Yeah, very exciting, that category. I did want to actually just really quickly also touch on, because one of the most talked about moments were the biggest snubs, which, have you seen, by the way, Georgina, Marty Supreme?
I have, yes.
Well, I just actually happened to watch it this weekend. It had 11 nominations, and it went home with nothing. It made it like the 3rd time in BAFTA's history that has happened. A brutal result. And it really does kind of dent the awards momentum for the film. And it's a shame because I did actually enjoy it. I don't know what you thought, but I thought his performance especially, not an easy watch, a very chaotic film, and it unraveled within itself. But you could kind of, if you looked away for a second, you just get really behind on the plot line. But one of the biggest snubs of the night for sure.
And Laura, what about who was in the audience? Of course, all the big stars, but there was royalty and all sorts there.
Yeah, and I should say that not too surprising that royalty was there per se. However, given the context of everything that's happening with the monarchy, It was a little bit uncomfortable. Prince William and Catherine were there. They drew huge attention given the wider pressure on the monarchy. It was the second high-profile appearance by senior royals since William's uncle was very famously arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. He actually was heckled a little bit on the red carpet, asked these questions, but he was able to kind of navigate that very easily, I should say. He just kind of ignored it. But at one point he was overheard by some reporters saying that he just needed a quiet time to reflect on what was happening.
Laura, thank you very much indeed. That's Monocle's Laura Kramer in our Zurich studio. Finally today, the Chilean-born artist, architect, photographer and filmmaker Alfredo Jaar, known for his work on social inequality and geopolitical issues around the world, is holding a solo exhibition in Tokyo. The exhibition's titled You and Me and the Other. It runs until the end of March. Monocle's Ryuma Takahashi spoke with Alfred about this project and his approach to making art.
This exhibition is titled You and Me and the Others, and it is divided in 5 segments. The first segment is a very personal segment about myself, my history. The other 4 parts focus on all the continents that my work has focused on. So it starts with Latin America, and then it moves to Europe, then to Africa, and then Asia.
As this exhibition was held in Tokyo, I noticed that some of your works relate to Japan. For example, I was very interested in your work, Tomorrow is Another Day, where the US flag is placed above and Japanese flag faced below. What was the idea behind this installation?
The work Tomorrow is Another Day is about the relationship between the United States and Japan. And it's my view of a relationship that I struggle to understand, because so many decades after the end of the World War, I do not understand why Japan is still such a vassal of the United States, such a slave to the United States. So it's a work that questions that reality and just asks the question, why is it like this? Why do Japan has to live under the shadow of the United States? And this work, I've created it because I've observed in the last few years that finally some Japanese politicians are starting to question their relationship to the United States. And so there is a new vision about that possible relation with the United States. And there is a new vision about Asia, about getting closer to China, getting closer to South Korea, and so on. So I was encouraged by what I've read and seen in the last few years. So I thought I would create a work that focuses on that relationship.
I was also interested in your work related to Hiroshima. For example, your work Hiroshima, Hiroshima, which is the video of the atomic bomb dome. Could you tell us more about this work?
Every day we get closer to nuclear annihilation and the possibility of this planet disappearing because of nuclear armament, because of wars, because of threats, because of irresponsible politicians. It seems to me that it is almost as if the lessons of Hiroshima have not been learned. The memory of Hiroshima is so precious to me, and it's such a horrible experience that Japan suffered, that I wanted not to recreate that suffering. It's impossible. It's more about sending a breeze of fresh air about the thinking about Hiroshima, what it represents, and how we should carry that message of peace to the world. And by doing that, I managed to get the permission from the mayor of the city of Hiroshima to film from above the dome. So I have put the spectator in the position of the bomb, because you look at the film and you see the camera going down exactly above the dome. And this is the trajectory of the bomb. So the spectator becomes the bomb.
After seeing this exhibition, I feel your artworks looks at global issues and at how we and you see the world today. So what are you trying to say about contemporary society through your artworks?
I am an architect that makes art. I never studied art, but I wanted to be an artist. I did what an architect does, which is to look at the context. And because for an architect, context is everything. So I respond to the context. So all the works are me in a specific context and responding to it. I am not a studio artist. I'm a project artist. And a project artist goes out in the world and responds to what he sees. And so every work in the exhibition is a response to a very specific reality in the world.
What led you to this kind of artistic expression in your career?
I am unhappy with the state of the world, and I like to look at the world and to react and to give my opinion and to try to resolve problems. And I always felt that the world of art and culture is a space of freedom. It's a space where the artist creates models of thinking the world. It's an extraordinary privilege to respond to a tragedy, to a situation, to a reality, and to speculate with ideas, with thinking about this situation. Now, I am aware that art cannot change the world, but art can show you that the world can be different. And that's what I try to do with my work.
Chilean artist Alfredo Jaar there in conversation with Monocle's Ryuma Takahashi in Tokyo. And the exhibition You and Me and the Other runs until the end of March. And that's all for this edition of The Briefing, which was produced by Carlotta Rebello. Our researcher was Annalise Maynard and our studio manager was Lily Austin. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Georgina Godwin. Goodbye and thanks for listening.